Hello, old sports. Welcome to the final episode of Each Retelling's Gatsby Month. For those of you who have been listening know, this was going to be the release date of our table read of Muppets Present the Great Gatsby. However, due to the ongoing WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, our podcast decided to pivot away from work that is currently being struck. While Muppets Present the Great Gatsby is a fan work by friend of the show Ben Crew, it is of course tied to a property owned by Disney. And given how many of those who are helping me make this podcast happen would like to be part of one or both of these unions someday, I've opted to hold off on posting our already recorded table read to not only protect the futures of my friends, but because supporting the strike is the right thing to do. If you have it within your power, I encourage you to do what you can to support the actors and writers at this time. Even vocalizing your support on even the smallest platform is something. And if you have room in your budget, donate to the Creator Fund, because without writers and actors, the majority of what we talk about on this podcast could not happen, and the heads of the studios are out of their minds to think they don't deserve everything they're asking for. So instead, I decided to do something a little different for this episode. In this episode, we are looking into the future of Gatsby retellings, specifically musical adaptations. And now to introduce the news segment of the show, Retelling the News, is Sam Marchioni.
Fasten your seatbelts, folks. It's a race to Broadway for two adaptations of F. Scott Fitzgerald's great American novel. Two challengers have emerged on the East Coast, but which of them will reach that elusive green light first, if at all? The contenders are New Jersey's Paper Mill Playhouse, which has just announced its lead casting of Jeremy Jordan as the titular Gatsby and Ava Noblezada as the elusive Daisy Faye Buchanan. While other roles have yet to be cast, this production will be helmed by director Mark Bruni with a score by Jason Howland and Nathan Tyson, a book by Kate Kerrigan, and choreography by Dominique Kelly. This production is set to run for a month this fall, from October to November. Further up north, the American Repertory Theater has secured the maven of indie rock, Florence Welch, to score their Gatsby with co-writer Thomas Bartlett, better known to many by his moniker, Doveman. This version, simply titled Gatsby, will be directed by Rachel Chavkin, with the book coming to us from Martina Mayock and the choreography from Sonia Taye. Casting has only just begun, so only time will tell who the ART will feel best embodies these players of the American dream when the production goes up in the spring of 2024. Who drives off in a yellow car and who ends up face first in a pool? We'll just have to wait and see.
Welcome to An Each Retelling, Old Sports, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. And welcome to our very first segment of Retelling the News. Joining me today are Calliope Castle, Shamila Karanakaran, and Sam Marchioni to discuss the two productions of The Great Gatsby that are currently in the works.
The newsie who gave us that announcement just hit me in the face with a pape.
Oh, God. We are going to be discussing this very interesting piece of Gatsby-related news for our final Gatsby Month episode. It's Phantom of the Opera all over again, folks.
It's the Wild Party all over again. That happened with the Wild Party, too.
Did it really?
Apparently.
My God. Basically, for those of you who are less educated in theater history than some of us would be, I would not blame you if that was the case. Basically, over in Boston, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Sam, since that's your home turf?
Okay, so if you've never heard of the American Repertory Theater, they're the hub of new theater in Boston, essentially. A lot of productions that start in the ART end up going to Broadway, usually because Diane Paulus uses the ART as her jumping off board to Broadway. It's a very contentious point amongst Boston theater makers that she's just using us for that, but past productions that have gotten that treatment have included Great Comet, My Beloved.
R.I.P.
To be clear, we're talking about Great Comet, not a musical called Great Comet, My Beloved, but it's also been true for the revival of Pippin, the revival of Porgy and Bess, the original production of Waitress.
Didn't 1776 revival start there?
Yes, it did, and Six had a stop there, although Six technically started at the Chicago Shakespeare Festival. So the ART is one of the main hubs of Broadway caliber work in the Boston area. That's not Boston Opera House and Emerson Colonial Theater that get used for touring productions a lot of the time. Although they did have the pre-Broadway tryout of Moulin Rouge at the Emerson Colonial Theater, which needs to get a better name, guys. I swear to God.
Yeah, it's the
But-
Colonial that does it.
But anyway, The ART is doing a musical version that they're just calling Gatsby. The big draw on the marquee right now is Florence Welch, who is doing the music along with her writing partner Devman. They're bringing back Tony winner Rachel Chavkin to direct, who has worked at the ART not only on Great Comet, but she and Dave Malloy did a 4-hour adaptation of Moby Dick that I saw, and it was everything in a way that was amazing, but also kind of exhausting. Like, the dramaturgy packet on that is insane. But Rachel Chavkin's back. They got the choreographer from Moulin Rouge, Sonia Taye. But anyway, The Wild Party, Jazz, for your edification, it's originally a 1928 epic poem that got turned into a musical by Michael John Laciosa.
Okay.
And George C. Wolfe, and then came the Andrew Lippa one in 2000, the same year.
Oh my god, that's insane. And then, Yeston and Coppet were doing their own Phantom musical, which would go on to be made into a made-for-TV movie starring Charles Dance, of all people.
It's a pretty good, it's not an accurate adaptation, but it's pretty good.
I've heard good things about it. And, of course, the one that everybody knows, the Andrew Lloyd Webber version. Both happened to kind of erupt around the same time. Because, along with Gatsby in Boston, it was either Callie or Shami who were the first to mention the Callie. You want to talk about it a bit?
I know that it is premiering at Paper Mill, where Newsies premiered. I know that Jeremy Jordan is in both, and I know that it is in New Jersey. And that is the extent of my knowledge.
And Ava Noblezada, you were the first one who told me about the room.
And their writing team was the writing team that did Paradise Square.
Had all that
Bastion of
controversy. It's the director or producer or somebody got put on a no-work list.
Oh.
But anyway, let's talk about it because it's kind of wild that right in time for Gatsby Month, both of these got announced.
It's not surprising to me because, you know, the whole reason we're doing Gatsby Month is because Gatsby's made it into the public domain.
I think Eva is a perfect choice for Daisy, but Jeremy Jordan has me on the fence.
I'm a little concerned with the casting around Ava, not because I don't think she can do it. She could absolutely do it. It's just, I'm worried that they haven't put quite enough thought into it. And I kind of wish we had Sid to talk about this, because Sid has a little more first-hand experience, but I'm worried that what they've tried to do in casting Ava is to go for the same sort of thing that Hamilton does and that Six does, but Hamilton has come under fire for the way that it handles its inclusive casting, and to a lesser extent so has Six. I highly recommend reading the interview that Sarah Porkelub did regarding their time in 1776 playing Edward Rutledge, because that was a lot that hit the same marks. I'm concerned that they're going for the kind of casting, it's like, oh, well, we got the best actor for the best part without considering what it means to have Daisy played by an Asian actress.
Yeah.
They could have done the, so if you were to do the Easter egg versus West egg, like the old money is like East Asian, and like West egg would be like Southeast Asian, South Asian, and then Gatsby would be the factor because he could have played the anti-black element in the Asian community bit that way.
That could have been interesting, but I do not trust these
I'm not sure they can do that if Gatsby's Jeremy Jordan.
Exactly.
No, absolutely not.
No.
Sounds very...
It goes back into what we discussed in the Little Shop episode about being colorblind versus being conscious of what would that mean for example, Daisy Buchanan being an Asian woman, considering the fact Tom Buchanan is
a goddamn racist.
One of literature's greatest racists, in fact. And it's so funny that this came out around the time where I'm working on
The Chosen and the Beautiful by Niveau. This is a version of The Great Gatsby in which Jordan Baker is a Vietnamese woman.
They kind of do an interesting thing with that, because Tom does go into his rant, and she's the one who
Gets the
beat them down line that Daisy has, except she says, we get it, you have to beat us down. It's like, oof.
You brought up Vietnam, and suddenly my mind's connecting to Ava Noblezada and Miss Saigon, and I hate Miss Saigon.
No.
I don't like it.
I hate how many amazing actresses got their start through that, is the thing.
Yeah.
It is kind of ironic, right when I was reading about Jordan being portrayed as an Asian American, we get this news that now Daisy's going to.
I know that everyone else has not been cast yet, but I really hope that they at least cast an Asian American actor for Nick.
That'd be neat.
Yeah, because there's even fewer opportunities for Asian American men.
Yeah.
So that would be awesome if they did that. And I mean, in fairness, as Sam, you pointed out in previous episodes, it's not as if racists don't get romantically involved with the very people that they look down on.
Yes.
It's just
so many historical films.
There's also just, it's when they get married that you start questioning it, because you've covered passing, you know about miscegenation laws.
Oh, yeah.
But then there's also, like, the fetishization and the exoticization. They covered this in Val, the 2013 version.
Yeah.
So, like, part of me is really worried that Paper Mill is gonna cast a white guy to play Tom, and then it's gonna be two white guys fighting over a delicate Asian woman who will have her heart be swayed by whomever offers her what she wants.
Yeah, not the best implications, you're right.
I mean, they haven't even gotten into casting yet for the ART version. I tried to get an audition with them, but they were only seeing equity people at the time, and I'm non-equity.
Right. That's a bummer. Like, I get it, but still.
But given that Sonia Tai is choreographing, I couldn't do it anyway. I'm not good at dancing.
Lawrence Welch doing the music, that just feels like a really good fit. I remember hearing about this years ago. I was worried that COVID had killed it.
And she was on the 2013 Gatsby soundtrack, so it really does work, I think.
I mean, maybe that means that the Lerman film kind of kicked Welch into being like, hey, why don't we do a whole thing of this?
I mean, I just feel like The Great Gatsby is definitely one of those stories that could easily translate well into a musical.
It would
Especially,
certainly
I think,
resolve
when it's
a lot of
jazz
the
era.
narration issues.
Exactly. Because, yeah, a lot of it just takes place inside Nick's head, and that can be very hard to translate into something that isn't a book.
And we know that Rachel Chavkin, at least, is a really good director to choose in this regard, because she's handled at least 3 musicals that involve a lot of narration like this. She's done Great Comet, which quotes directly from Tolstoy's text extensively. She's done Hadestown, which is presented in an oral tradition that's very narration heavy. And she did Moby Dick, which really only I can speak to because it was at a limited engagement back in 2019, and there was a lot of pulling directly from the text there too. Oh my, there was so much in that Moby Dick, you guys.
Dave Malloy, I actually read the behind the scenes book about Great Comet, and Dave Malloy talks about how, oh, I forgot I could write original lyrics for this thing. I didn't have to just quote from War and Peace. Like, he said the first original piece that he wrote was during the rave scene, where it's like...
Drink
that...
with me, my love, for there's fire in the sky
Yes,
and there's
that
ice
part.
on the ground. That one.
For there's fire in the sky, and there's ice on the ground. Either way, my soul will die.
It's hard to talk about these musicals without knowing more about the casting. And
Of course.
I'm not opposed to the idea of Jeremy Jordan as Gatsby, because I think
he'll be great.
I think he can be very charming.
I hope he gets a well-written, well-directed Gatsby.
Maybe he'll get a Tony out of this.
That would be great. Like, I feel like he could really pull this off, given the right direction.
I'm not sure what's going to be the situation with the casting for the ART, because they're probably going to find, like, some big New York actor and put them up for Gatsby at least, if not the entire company. I'm not 100% sure, because there are controversies surrounding Rachel Chavkin, especially recently with Hadestown and the casting controversy.
Shami, did you know about it? You know about it? Okay.
I don't know about it. I mean, I need
Okay.
to be explained to because I am very new to this.
Okay,
That's okay.
so basically, they stopped at Hadestown, they realized that the entire ensemble was made up of people of color,
Yes.
and that the lead, Orpheus, is still being played by Reeve Carney, a white guy, and they're like, oh no, we're doing a white savior thing, and so their solution was to fire a black member of the ensemble to bring in a white person.
Why? Oh.
Which, yeah, exactly. I remember telling this to Callie when we first heard about it. I was just like, okay, you went from something that could possibly be questionable, but at least you could technically have plausible deniability about, to doing actual harm. Doing something
Okay, hang
actually
on.
racist.
The actors, her name is Kim Moore, she performs under the name Kim Hill, and she's suing Hadestown for racial discrimination because they kicked her out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was no reason to do that. Like, yes, you might have done a white savior thing, but here you actually did a discrimination on purpose.
And you have...
You could have kicked out Reeve Carney. I've seen phenomenal Orpheus of color.
So have Jazz and I! So have Jazz and I!
Saya was amazing. We love him.
We
hope
want
he
him
goes
to
back.
take over.
Should have done what they did for Welcome to Night Vale, where the voice actor who played Carlos, he was replaced with Dylan Maran, who is an actual Latino man.
That is true. They could have done that. And like,
Oh my god. Watch Paper Mill Playhouse get fucking Reeve Carney for Nick Carraway, and that makes it just so freaking awkward. Because it would line up. He's been Spider-Man just like Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man.
Reeve Carney and Eva are married in real life.
yeah, so it would be
Do you
kind of
think
weird
that'll
for those to play
stop them?
cousins.
No, I know that's the point.
I mean, Daisy's already kind of weird with Nick anyway.
Yeah, in an episode that I had to postpone, we actually delved super into that because for whatever fucking reason, Francis Ford Coppola is weird about cousins. But before we get off topic again, who would be some good options here for either one?
I would love to see Lucas Steele take on Gatsby at the ART. Okay, I broke Callie.
I love Lucas.
I broke Callie.
I mean, we all do, but my goodness.
I have not heard anything major from Lucas Steele since Great Comet, as far as I can tell.
Which is heartbreaking. He's so talented.
That note.
Next day, Anatole left for Petersburg.
That one note where he's just like, what, like it's hard?
That was written as a joke.
Oh,
Lucas
right,
Steele-
he was in Emoji Land. I forgot about Emoji Land.
Oh, good for him. That was a good show, actually.
By the way, is Ariel Strato in anything yet? Because
Oh,
potential.
he's tried to leave Broadway for greater Hollywood avenues, like
Buddy.
a certain Olivia Wilde film. And
But who would you have cast him as, Shami?
Well, I did consider him as Nick at one point, but
Interesting.
I think it could also be interesting. I have a feeling that Derek Kalina is probably going to be in the mix for Nick at either production.
I would not be surprised, considering he just left Moulin Rouge.
And Eva's leaving Hadestown right at the same time.
He's basically already kind of played that, especially if you go with the Lerman joke we could make. But again,
yeah, I'm just trying to look up a list of like Asian American actors on Broadway to see if there's any fit. But
there's really not a lot.
all that's coming up is like he played Aladdin.
Adam
Telly Long?
Jacobs?
Yeah,
Adam
that
Jacobs.
one.
He might be a little old for Nick.
Yeah.
Telly Long came to mind, even though he's not, obviously they are different types of Asian, but you think Broadway cares? Unfortunately.
Let's double check. Ooh. Let's look at when the last revival of King and I was.
Editor Jasmine here. I just wanted to let you all know that we came to the conclusion that there is actually a perfect choice for Eva Noblezada's Nick to her Daisy. Vincent Rodriguez III, who you might remember from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So get on that, Broadway Productions.
I offer Shoba as Jordan.
Shobha Narayan? Ooh. Well, I know who one of my best friends would love to see as Gatsby to continue a certain trend.
Damn it.
Well, get Aaron in another Leo role. I just know for a fact my best friend Audrey would lose her mind if he did that.
I don't think she'd survive.
Probably
She
not.
fades.
She absolutely would. She would come back on Tumblr just to rant
I'm
about
not
it.
sure if Aaron would be the right fit for that role.
I didn't say he'd necessarily be the right fit. It just would be very, very funny because once again he takes over a Leo role. But honestly, like the first person who comes to my mind for Jordan is Krista Rodriguez. Actually,
Ooh, okay.
Huh.
I like that.
like I feel like she could pull that off very well.
I could see that. Or another person they might... I feel like Betsy Wolfe would probably try to jump all over Jordan, if only because she's still gunning for a Tony, but she might be a little old for Jordan at this
It's
point. I'm
getting
not sure.
sad.
That being said, I love Betsy in
Yeah.
And Juliet. I don't want to see her stop being Anne Hathaway.
I almost got to see her in Waitress, but she was doing promotion in California with Jason Derulo when I went. Or whoever it was that was taking over for Dr. Potimer.
Okay, interesting. Any final thoughts?
I need to see casting for both shows, full casting, before I make any final
Yes,
decisions.
Well, yeah,
I
of
want to
course.
see who does the set design.
That too. Like you could do some interesting things with this.
I wanna
Lighting
see
design as well.
Bradley.
All right.
This is a shout out to Bradley King, who is an amazing lighting designer. Like, who else would think of making the white whale in Moby Dick just a wall of blinding white lights? It was amazing.
Amazing. Who's got stuff to plug?
Support the actors and writers through the Entertainment Community Fund. I don't feel comfortable plugging my own stuff right now.
That's valid.
Same here.
Yep, that is our final take here. Support the arts, support the writers, support the actors.
And
Give them
go
their
see some
due.
live theater.
Coming up next, we had an interview with friend of the show, Brian Harris's friend, Violette Remington, regarding her own Gatsby musical project.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much. My name is Violette Remington or Violet Rain. However, yeah, either work.
Okay, yep, sure thing. And well, a friend of the show, Brian, did let us know that you had actually written a Gatsby musical, so I thought it'd be perfect to attach to our previous discussion on the Gatsby musicals currently in production. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe even this project?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I am a musician, an actor, and I guess you could say I'm a writer because I did write this musical, Beautiful Fools. I co-wrote it with a friend, Brittany Weinstock. She's a wonderful, beautiful opera singer. But Beautiful Fools was a project that she and I actually developed and produced in our senior year of high school. And we knew we wanted to write a musical together. We knew we just wanted to close out our senior year that way. And also, she and I, we just loved working together so much.
Aww.
And we debated a lot of different stories that we were going to tell. We were thinking, should we do Pride and Prejudice? There was a lot of back and forth about which novel we were going to adapt. I don't know why that was what our heart was set on, was adapting a novel.
Okay.
But we just read The Great Gatsby the year before, and I think there was something of a big Great Gatsby wave happening that year. I don't know if it's just because we just read the book, but I felt like it was everywhere that year specifically. Maybe it's because we were approaching the 2020s and there was a little bit of excitement about, a decade having just passed. So we decided to develop The Great Gatsby. Our story was a little bit more focused on all of the characters of The Great Gatsby as opposed to just Nick Carraway's perspective. So we tried to find a name that we didn't want to call it, The Great Gatsby Musical, because I'm sure that already exists.
They're working on it.
Exactly. So Beautiful Fools came to us because we thought that was an apt description, a story that kind of took on a lot of the perspectives that are in The Great Gatsby. So that's where that came from.
Okay, that's interesting. And a running joke this month was that it seems like everybody has read it in their junior year of high school.
Yeah.
Was that your first encounter with this story, or obviously must have liked it enough to made it into a musical? So could you tell me a little bit more about your relationship with it?
Yeah, absolutely. My relationship with The Great Gatsby has changed a lot over the years because I'm 21, I'm turning 22 this year, and when I wrote this musical, I was 16 turning 17. So the way
you're like
that
a baby.
it's crazy thinking about, oh my goodness, I wrote this a really long time ago now. But I had a very different opinion. It wasn't a very different opinion, but a lot of my views on the world and the story of The Great Gatsby, I kind of had them back then, and they loosely inspired Beautiful Fools. But if I were to, my co-writer, Brittany and I, we often talk about, we're going to do it again. But there are so many rewrites I would want to make just based on how The Great Gatsby has changed and how my opinion of it has changed. Let me rephrase that. It's not my opinion of it that's changed. It's you just get a little older, you get a little wiser, you see things differently. And I was a little bit onto it back then. So part of why I wanted to why I keep saying it was Beautiful Fools. It was about all of the beautiful fools of The Great Gatsby, not just Gatsby and Nick Carraway, which the story generally revolves around. Because I am part of the very small minority that has a lot of sympathy for Daisy Buchanan. as well as Myrtle,
You know what?
actually.
Absolutely, yeah. Also, a very frequent discussion during Gatsby Month is that, yeah, a lot of us absolutely feel for Daisy in spite of all of her faults. I even inserted a bit that John Green did for one of his crash courses on The Great Gatsby. It's how you're not supposed to like Daisy in an uncomplicated way like you would cupcakes. Like, she is supposed to be complicated, and it's like, yeah, she's in a toxic relationship at a time when women had very few recourses in that. So,
Exactly. And I think it's interesting looking at the relationship between Daisy and Gatsby now as an adult versus back then, where I remember in junior year of high school, we would get into all of these debates about, oh, who was right, who was wrong. And one thing that I think escaped a lot of topics of The Great Gatsby back then, and still does, is the age difference between Daisy and Gatsby when they met. That Daisy, I believe she was like 17, 18, and Gatsby would have been in his like late 20s, I want to say. And
yeah, but it was 5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And then 5 years fast forward, obviously Daisy is a little bit older, Gatsby's a little bit older, but one of the biggest things that when Gatsby is sharing his reasoning with Nick for why he fell in love with Daisy, it's because she's a nice girl or a good girl. And when you read the book, you don't really think about it that much. But when you think about it now, he's comparing, because Jordan Baker was obviously a part of that crowd. He's comparing Daisy's good girl to Jordan's not good girl, right? So essentially, if you read between the lines, Gatsby admired Daisy for her virtue. These things that aren't all that honorable, I think, for a man who had relationships by then and was much older than her. So fast forward, Daisy is in this abusive relationship. She has a daughter, and this figure from her past who took her virginity and literally left has allegedly been stalking her and following up on her for 5 years. That's the angle that I like to take on The Great Gatsby.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, no, we definitely discussed how, in spite, I do have a fondness for Jay Gatsby as a character, even though, all of that is absolutely true. Yeah. We did talk about how, unfortunately, this episode had to be postponed because of the strike, but we did mention how you could do a Gatsby horror movie, and I would probably devour it.
Yeah, I would love a Gatsby horror movie. That's actually a great idea, and I hope it happens one day.
Absolutely. Those are all very good points. Like, you could absolutely put it like a purity culture read onto Gatsby if you wanted. And, just part of how he wants it to be just like it was before, like, the 5 years passed. It's just like, she's had a baby, Jay.
Yeah, exactly.
That changes things.
She's done. And I think it's very interesting how most classroom discussions, that whole junior year reading Gatsby, it's never really a topic that like, oh yeah, she's just going to leave her daughter and her life of security. The whole conversation is, oh, she's so shallow because she doesn't want to leave her husband and her like 2-year-old daughter for this guy who like left years ago and she hasn't heard of in 5 years. So
yeah, it's like she doesn't know she can rely on him.
She doesn't know. She has no idea. And I think that we're supposed to get the impression that Gatsby is really the first man in Daisy's, at least romantically, who informs who she is. So that's a lot of the angle that I took in Beautiful Fools. I played Daisy when we did it.
Nice.
And I loved playing that role. I would love to play her again. I think she's ridiculously complex because all of the things that we don't like about Daisy are also present factors to be explored. My perspective on Beautiful Fools is, I think it's just very different. And I think that I only mean different in the sense that it's a very standard take on Gatsby, that, oh, he was this lost, sad romantic who just loved her and she walked all over him. And it's obviously far more complicated than that, and all of the angles deserve to be talked about and explored. So if I rewrote it, or I wouldn't rewrite it, I would adapt it to perhaps take on an even more a view that really looks at all of the different angles, the nuances of the Myrtle Daisy comparison, because to tell you the truth, they're actually not too different as women. They're just on completely different sides of life circumstances, and that's something to be explored as well, I think.
Yeah, Ben, honestly, that's such a classic thing to do in musicals, I feel like, especially when there's some kind of love polygon involved. Kind of end up comparing the two women. Like, you'll see it in something like the Dr. Zhivago musical. They ended up singing about their very complicated relationship with the one man that they're fighting over, basically.
Right.
But it comes as no surprise. She is gracious, she is kind, more than I would be if I were in her place.
I do think that musicals are good for, in spite of how people tend to think of them as very unrealistic, I think one of their strengths is that you can kind of delve into the nuances, because you could just have a character have a solo, spotlights on them, and you actually get a look inside their head.
Right, exactly. And I think that musicals provide something that plays, I mean, monologues obviously exist, but to tell you the truth, and this is just because I love music and I grew up with musicals, I will buy into a solo about what's going on in a character's head maybe a little bit more than, like, this person is seriously just, like, talking to himself for 2 minutes. But that's
well,
okay.
I mean, Nick definitely would.
Right,
Nick
right.
definitely would, but you are right. Like, there's just something much more compelling about a song. Yeah, sure, the monologue, you can talk about your feelings, but music very much conveys emotions, I think, a lot more efficiently.
Absolutely. I remember one of my favorite, I think it was the first piece that I wrote for the musical. It is called Beautiful Little Fool. The song that I'm referencing, where Daisy explains to Nick, it's the scene in the book, how she talks about how unhappy she is. But I chose to take that into a song where she talks about everything that she's unhappy with and how her daughter was born and her hopes of her daughter being a beautiful little fool so that she won't ever feel the pain of life. And I think that obviously Daisy's not singing it in the book, but it was a very fun way for us to interpret that moment in a way that gave us the opportunity to really put a little bit more of Daisy into the plot line and push along the plot line. Here we get a song has the opportunity to introduce all of these different plot points and ideas that sometimes can feel a little overwhelming if you're just sharing it through dialogue. And I'm very grateful for music as that forum.
Absolutely. Let's delve a little bit further into it. You kind of said how it was basically a straightforward adaptation, but you just got a little bit more of each character's. Would you like to kind of delve further into how you had initially adapted it? And since you had mentioned you would like to kind of tweak it, how you would portray it now?
Yeah, thank you. So I spent a lot of time thinking about The Great Gatsby still, actually. It's such a present story in my mind, and I think about how I would like to reshape the story. It was a pretty straightforward adaptation that we did, although I did sneak in sympathy for some of the women in the story that don't often get that sympathy. It was narrated by Nick Carraway, as is the book, and I often think how if I were to reframe the story, I would actually, one of the biggest rewrites I'd be interested in doing is having Jordan Baker be a narrator equal to Nick. And that's an interesting take. Yeah, we played around with that a little bit. My co-writer played Jordan also. So she was a more present figure in our adaptation of Beautiful Fools. But I think that it would be really interesting to get that double perspective, because if Nick Carraway really represents Gatsby and just there's all of these conversations that people have about how Nick is in love with Gatsby. I'm not sure what I believe. I think that he does have a strange fixation with Gatsby. And I think that a lot of that has more so to do, though, between Fitzgerald splitting himself between those two characters in his own writing. But who knows? There's a lot down that. But I think that it would be interesting for Jordan to kind of represent Daisy in that similar way, because I would love to see that personally if we redid it. I think that The Great Gatsby is tough because it really is. I would be very interested to know what the story would look like if F. Scott Fitzgerald had written it with no narrator and from the perspective of just, I don't know, the eyes of
Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. Yeah,
But I think that the story is it's the way that Nick sees everything, and he has all of these commentaries about other people. And it's true that we did follow that in my production, but I would really love to see. I think that we kind of did a disservice where we talk about it being called Beautiful Fools because it takes more perspectives on, but I would just like to dive into that a little bit deeper.
Absolutely, yeah, because for such a little book, there's just so much you could delve into, since there are so many characters you could add some more nuance to. Right. Yeah, no, I'd be fascinated to see that. So why do you think The Great Gatsby endures? Why has it lived in your head rent-free all this time? And why do we as a culture still keep on teaching it, keep on retelling it, especially now that it is in the public domain?
Right. Oh my gosh, it's in the public domain. That was also part of why we called it Beautiful Fools at the time. Because it was not in public domain when we wrote it. That's so funny. That was such a big deal for us back then. Anyways, I think that this story persists because, I mean, it really beautifully captures human flaws. There is no perfect character in The Great Gatsby. But I think what's even more interesting about it, and I'm not knocking Fitzgerald. I want to preface this when I say that. I think that he's a brilliant author. This is obviously why I've written a musical inspired by his story, because I have immense respect for him. But I think that his story was very inspired by his life and how the jaded feelings that he had towards the women who'd burned him in his life, particularly his wife, which is why I think it's interesting. I was thinking this the other day. All of the women in The Great Gatsby are generally disliked. I mean, Myrtle, Daisy, and Jordan, there's very little sympathy, public sympathy for these three characters. Whereas Gatsby, Nick, Tom, and Wilson, two of those four men are abusive to their wives. But the four men, I think, tend to get a little bit more public sympathy than the three women, which is really, that's why I'm inspired by this story and to keep telling it, because I think there's a lot of angles to be explored. I think that it's a shame the way that the public opinion of these characters, I would love to see shift over time. And I'd love to see bigger conversations about I don't want to use the word problematic, but I'm going to say problematic aspects of this story. And I think that if we address those problematic aspects of the story, we don't have to have so much hate in our hearts for fictional characters like Daisy. Why should we hate a fictional woman? Literally. So that's been a big one for me.
At least we shouldn't hate her more than her racist, abusive husband. Like, we absolutely we should absolutely be saving that energy for Tom Buchanan.
He's terrible. There's really nothing redeemable about Tom Buchanan, but people always, I feel like, are saying things like, yeah, well, you expect him to be bad, so that's why I hate her more, because and it's like, what high expectations women in our society has, that it's okay that the men who do awful things because we expect them to?
That does a disservice to women and men, I feel like.
It does. It really does, because it does a disservice to everybody all around. Yeah.
Oh, God. I had not realized that people had so much sympathy for Tom Buchanan. I mean, I vaguely remember my teacher when I was saying, yeah, no, I don't blame Daisy for cheating on him. He's terrible.
Yeah.
And he was like,
I also
I mean, she still cheat?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, and cheating is never good, but in the context of The Great Gatsby, I don't know that people have so much sympathy for Tom. I think I went to school went to high school in Newport Beach. I think that the culture there was particularly looking for excuses and reasons to be supportive of people who don't necessarily do good things. That's what I say.
Oh, great.
So that's kind of where I read The Great Gatsby, which obviously kind of nurtured my support for figures like Daisy Buchanan is because it just felt outrageous that everybody around me seemingly was like, nope, she's awful. She's the devil. She's the worst, which is absurd. She's a complicated woman.
No,
I think she would literally be
like,
a year or two older than me.
Exactly. It's like she's so young, and she's living in a time where, I mean, even if she wasn't Catholic, which they did mention, like, she could have technically divorced him, but she's Catholic, so that would have been okay. And also, like, let's face it, societal pressures for regarding divorce would have still been alive and well. So it's just like, what exactly was she supposed to do?
Right, and the book does make it, the book makes a distinction between Daisy and Jordan. Daisy being a good girl, Jordan being a little bit more progressive. And I think that it's important to take into account the kind of society that Daisy came from, the kind of personality she had, where it might have made more sense for somebody like Jordan to be like, I'm going to get a divorce. I'm going to be, this was the 1920s we're talking about. But for Daisy Buchanan, who came from Louisville, Kentucky, from this really wealthy family back in the 1910s, growing up in this lifestyle where she was really expected to be of servitude to the men in her life, saying that she could get a divorce is really not looking into the complexities of what life would have been like.
Exactly. They had just barely gotten the vote. She really couldn't own her own property. There's so much she would not have been able to do. She would have been out on her own. There's a very good chance she would have lost custody of her daughter. And while, the book didn't necessarily make it seem like she really cared too much about her, that doesn't mean she didn't.
I'd actually argue that, and this is another aspect that I would take on in another production of Beautiful Fools, I would argue that Daisy's daughter was probably the purest love that she had in her life, and that's just not an angle that Nick Carraway as a man, and as the narrator would dive into, Nick Carraway is not going to be thinking to himself, gosh, Daisy really loves her daughter. He's going to look at these really wealthy people and think how careless they are. But
which he's not wrong, but
he's not wrong. But I think that Daisy, Tom's love for Daisy is conditional. Gatsby's love for Daisy is conditional. Daisy is probably looking at it as, this is something that I've brought into this world. This is even if that's not necessarily right. But I mean, this is her one opportunity to have somebody who unconditionally loves her as her mother. So that's why I would argue that she actually really loves her daughter. And that's just not a present factor in the story. But I would love to see that in more adaptations of the story.
Yeah, because, like, Nick absolutely has tunnel vision. He's very set in his opinions on things. I mean, even the discussion he had with Daisy that inspired the title, he's thinking of her as being cynical, like she's just trying to manipulate him, basically. And it's just like, dude, maybe listen?
Yeah.
Even if she is manipulating you, gee, I wonder why she feels she needs attention like that.
Right. And I think that there's something to be said for the fact that the title Beautiful Fool was coined by Zelda Fitzgerald, and Beautiful Fool, which is such a present theme in The Great Gatsby, that was Zelda Fitzgerald's earnest hope for her daughter, her and F. Scott Fitzgerald's daughter. And F. Scott Fitzgerald took Beautiful Fools and put it in his story. So it's hard for us to assign whether Daisy was being manipulative or not, because those words belonged to Zelda. They weren't.
Who was often silenced by her husband.
Yes. Who lived a really tragic life and passed away alone. And she died in a fire. And they had a really awful and complicated relationship. And I think that is a very important thing in analyzing The Great Gatsby, is thinking about the relationship that was a huge inspiration for the story.
I mean, I definitely find that idea very refreshing, because all throughout this, I've definitely encountered a lot of different takes on Daisy. Previous episode was Self-Made Boys, where it's basically what I call the fix-it-fic version of Great Gatsby. And to their credit, it's definitely one of the most sympathetic portrayals of Daisy I've ever seen, but this is also a version of Daisy who does end up leaving Tom, who actually she runs off with Jordan. So
really? I love that.
Yep. Nick runs off with Gatsby. Daisy runs off with Jordan.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, no, it's a very comforting book. It's like the dessert you get after reading The Great Gatsby. It's like, for once, they kind of have something resembling a happy ending.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
that works out, I think.
Oh yeah, me too. I absolutely do. But one criticism we had was that it kind of shaves off the nuance of the characters, and clearly it seems like your version of things would have done the exact opposite. Like everybody gets a say, and you kind of flesh out those nuances. So I am. So no, if you ever end up revisiting this, I would absolutely love to see it somehow. It sounds fascinating.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I've taken a big turn away from musical theater since I graduated high school, and I focus a lot on just music now, but that doesn't mean that I don't ever want to get back into it. A lot of the songs from The Great Gatsby, we always just called it Gatsby. I mean, we never really referenced it as Beautiful Fools in private. A lot of the songs I wrote for that musical I still perform today, and I do consider putting out. Even though I wrote them so many years ago, there's still some of my favorite things and my proudest things that I've written.
I love that.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe someday I'll do something with it again.
And speaking of, do you have anything to plug?
Oh, thank you. I am currently putting together an album and a music video that I am set to release in like 2.5 weeks. There isn't a set date, but we're looking at mid-August. It's called Planet Peach. It came to us before the Barbie movie came out. I want to say that. But it is a very peachy, fantastical, pink, 1950s inspired song, and then a group of songs that follow Planet Peach, and it's kind of a concept album that explores our dreams and the places that we would like to go to and the reasons we have dreams, whether they be getting your heart broken by somebody or grief. So the album kind of walks you through the things that we desire and the levels get a little bit more serious over time. It starts as a little tongue-in-cheek. But anyway, I'm putting that out. The music video album is Planet Peach. The song/music video is Planet Peach. But then there's about 6 or 7 other songs in the album that are going to come with it. So that's what's going on.
That sounds amazing. I definitely look forward to that. Let me know when there's a release date. I'd be fascinated to give this a listen.
Thank you. I will absolutely share it. Thank you so much.
No, of course. Do you have any final thoughts before we close things out then?
I could write an essay on sympathizing for Daisy Buchanan. Maybe I will one day. I don't think I could shut up about Daisy. So thank you for allowing me the forum.
Absolutely.
I think The Great Gatsby, it started what has become a love affair for me, reframing stories of women that I think have often been misconstrued and portrayed in ways, whether it's in literature or in history. Anne Boleyn is another figure in history I love to look at differently. I love my beheaded queens.
Sam would love you. Sam Marchioni is a huge Boleyn person.
Oh, good. Boleyn is great. I actually like Catherine Howard just as much, the lesser-known beheaded queen. But I love Anne Boleyn. I did Sleeping Beauty back in December. I really Beautiful Fools was something, it was a big turning point for me where I love to look at stories of people who I just don't think have had their story told. Really, I don't think we're looked at as humans, maybe because of their gender and a lot of other factors at play. So that's The Great Gatsby for me. I could go on. I shouldn't.
No, absolutely.
I should do that on my own time.
Hey, listen, this is what podcasts are for, and you're definitely right. Okay. Like, part of why I do this podcast is not just because I have hyperfixated on retellings of old stories since I was a teenager, but it's also just, I feel like people do need to broaden their horizons and different points of view can change these stories.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. That's a really beautiful way of putting it.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. But I guess that's about it. If you ever want to come back, I would love to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I've had so much fun.
Yay! I often get that, so I'm very happy about that.
Good.
And that is the last of Gatsby Month. Usually this is where I would put my usual plugs. But at this point, I genuinely think that we'd be better off just asking you to please, once again, support the writer's strike and the actor's strike however you possibly can. Why don't you close us out one more time, Justin?
And as I sat there, brooding on the old, unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He didn't know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch our arms out further, in one fine morning. And so we beat on, boats against the current, bore back ceaselessly into the